The Dragon Queen asked why a human would risk his life for Hera. He just smiled and said, "Because you cried." Tai Yang stood at the window of his small room and looked out at the alien city below. The buildings were made of crystal and metal, reaching up toward 3 moons that hung in the purple sky. He was far from Earth, far from everything he knew, but he had volunteered for this mission. Someone had to try to help the Drakir people, and he wanted to be that person. The Drakir were dragons, not the dragons from old Earth stories, but real beings who could fly through space and lived for thousands of years. They were powerful and ancient, and their empire had existed long before humans ever left Earth. But now they were dying. Slowly, quietly, they were fading away. Taeyang was an engineer. He fixed things. That was what he did best. The Drakir had asked for help with their stargates, the giant machines that let ships travel between worlds. The gates were breaking down and the Drakir no longer had the energy to repair them. So Earth had sent Taeyang and a few others to see what they could do. The next morning, Taeyang was told that Queen Yura wanted to meet him. He felt nervous. Nobody just met with the Dragon Queen. She was 8,000 years old. She had ruled her people since before humans learned to write. What would he even say to someone like that? The throne room was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Taeyang could barely see it. Everything was made of dark stone that seemed to glow from within. And there on a throne that looked carved from a single piece of starlight sat Queen Yura. She was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Her scales were black and deep blue like the night sky filled with stars. Her wings were folded against her back, each one large enough to cover a house. Her eyes were golden and ancient, and when she looked at Taeyang, he felt like she could see everything he had ever been or would ever be. "You are the human engineer," she said. Her voice was deep and clear, filling the entire room. "Yes, Your Majesty," Taeyang said, trying not to let his voice shake. "My name is Taeyang. I'm here to help with the stargates." "Help," Yura repeated, and there was something almost sad in her voice. "Can you truly help, little human? Your people are so young. You live for barely a breath of time." Taeyang felt a flash of frustration. Yes, humans did not live as long as Drakir. Yes, they were young compared to these ancient beings. But that did not mean they were useless. "We may be young, Your Majesty, but we learn fast. And we don't give up easily." Something flickered in Yura's golden eyes. It might have been amusement. Or maybe interest. "We shall see," she said. Over the next few weeks, Taeyang worked on the stargates. He studied the ancient technology, trying to understand how it worked. The Drakir engineer who worked with him was named Yunji. She was kind and patient, even though Taeyang asked what must have seemed like stupid questions to someone who had studied these machines for centuries. But the more Taeyang learned, the more worried he became. The problem was not with the machines themselves. The problem was with the energy that powered them. That energy came from the Drakir royal family. Their very life force powered the gates, powered the Empire's technology, powered everything. And that life force was dying. Taeyang went to Nari, the queen's advisor. Nari was old even for a Drakir. Her scales were silver with age and her eyes held deep wisdom. When Taeyang explained what he had discovered, she did not seem surprised. "We know," Nari said quietly. "We have known for many centuries." "Then why aren't you doing anything about it?" Taeyang asked. "What would you have us do?" Nari asked. "We have studied this problem for longer than your species has existed. There is no solution. We are dying. It is simply the way of things." Taeyang could not accept that. He requested another meeting with Queen Yura. This time he brought data and charts showing her what he had found. He had ideas for possible solutions, ways they might be able to help. But Yura looked at his charts for only a moment before pushing them away. "You do not understand," she said, and her voice was cold now, distant. "You humans live for what? 80 years? Perhaps 90 if you are lucky. You cannot possibly understand the weight of 8,000 years. You cannot understand what it means to watch your people slowly fade, knowing there is nothing you can do." "Maybe that's exactly why I can help," Taeyang said, surprising himself with his boldness. "Because I don't have 8,000 years to accept defeat. I only have maybe 50 or 60 years left in my life, and I don't want to waste them watching good people give up." Yura's eyes blazed with anger. "You dare up?" "I dare to care," Taeyang interrupted. "I dare to think that your lives matter, that your people matter, and I dare to believe that giving up is wrong no matter how long you've been doing it." For a moment, Taeyang thought Yura might kill him right there. Her claws dug into the arms of her throne. Her wings spread slightly, filling the room with shadow. But then slowly the anger faded from her eyes. What replaced it was something sadder. "Leave," she said quietly. "Just leave." A few days later, there was a great meeting of all the different species in the galaxy. Representatives from hundreds of worlds came to the Drakir capital. The meeting was about what would happen after the Drakir died. How would their territory be divided? Who would take control of their worlds? Taeyang sat with the other humans and watched in growing horror. These people were talking about the Drakir as if they were already dead. They were dividing up an empire like vultures picking at a corpse. And the worst part was that the Drakir themselves said nothing. Queen Yura sat on her throne, huge and silent, accepting it all with terrible dignity. That night, Taeyang could not sleep. He walked through the palace gardens trying to clear his head. The gardens were beautiful, filled with plants from 1,000 different worlds. Crystal flowers glowed softly in the darkness, and water flowed through channels cut in the stone. That was when he saw her. Queen Yura stood in a small clearing, in front of a monument made of black stone. But she was not in her huge dragon form. She had taken a smaller shape, almost human-sized, with only small wings and a tail. She stood very still, looking at the monument. The monument had names carved into it, hundreds of names, thousands. All the dragon kings and queens who had come before her. All the rulers who were gone now, leaving her alone. Taeyang was about to turn and leave to give her privacy. But then he heard something that made him freeze. Queen Yura was crying. The sound was soft, almost silent. But tears fell from her golden eyes, and when they hit the ground, they turned into small crystals that glowed with inner light. Each tear was a piece of her sadness made solid, and there were so many of them. Taeyang stood there, unsure what to do. Every instinct told him to leave, to pretend he had not seen this. But he thought about what his sister Hana had told him before he left Earth. She had said, "The measure of who we are is not in our strength. It's in showing up when someone needs us, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." So Taeyang stepped forward, deliberately making noise so Yura would hear him coming. Her head snapped around, and her eyes went wide with shock and then blazing with fury. "Leave," she commanded, her voice shaking. "Leave now." That is not a request, human, but Taeyang did not leave. Instead, he walked to a bench nearby and sat down, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm not here as a diplomat, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "I'm here as someone who once watched his own mother give up too easily when she got sick. I couldn't help her, but maybe I can help you, help me." Yura's voice was bitter. "Your mother lived, what, 70 years? Maybe 80? I have lived for 8,000 years. Do not dare compare." "You're right," Taeyang said. "I can't imagine 8,000 years. But I can imagine being tired. I can imagine carrying a weight so heavy that you just want to put it down. And I saw that in your eyes the first time we met." Yura stared at him. Slowly, very slowly, the anger faded from her face. "Why are you here?" she asked, and now she just sounded tired. So very tired. "Because I saw you crying," Taeyang said simply, "and I decided that wasn't acceptable." The Dragon Queen asked why a human would risk his life for her. "Because we're not Drakir," Jiwon interrupted. She had been studying the genetic data, her face intense with focus. "Your scientists tried to fix Drakir genetics with Drakir solutions. But what if we use something different?" "Different how?" Yoonji asked. "Human genetics," Jiwon said. "I've been comparing human and Drakir DNA. We're completely different species, but there are some basic similarities. And human DNA is messy. It's adaptive. It survived everything Earth threw at us. It won't," Taeyang said with more confidence than he felt. "We'll make sure of it." Over the next few days they prepared. Jiwon and Yoonji worked together to create the treatment. Taeyang stayed with Junho, making sure the young prince knew what he was agreeing to. "Are you afraid?" Taeyang asked him, terrified, Junho admitted, but also hopeful. "That is a feeling we Drakir have not had in a very long time." The day of the procedure came. Junho lay on a medical table, surrounded by equipment both human and Drakir. Jiwon administered the treatment, and then they waited. For 3 days, Junho's body fought the foreign genetic material. He was in terrible pain, and there were moments when Taeyang thought they had made a terrible mistake. Queen Yura watched from an observation window, her face unreadable but her hands clenched so tight that her claws drew blood from her own palms. On the 3rd day, Junho's vital signs stabilized. On the 7th day, his damaged genetic markers began to repair themselves. On the 10th day, Junho opened his eyes. They were clearer and brighter than they had been in years. It worked, Jiwon whispered. By all the stars, it actually worked. The cure was possible. The Drakir could be saved, but as Taeyang looked at the data, he saw a problem. The treatment would not work as well on someone as old as Queen Yura. Her damage was too deep, too old. She would need something more. She would need continuous treatment over several weeks, and the strain on the human donor would be enormous. Before Jiwon could even finish explaining, Taeyang spoke. "I'll do it." The Dragon Queen asked why a human would risk his life for her. "You are not my queen," Taeyang said gently. "But you are someone I care about. And that matters more." Yura stared at him. "Why?" she demanded, her voice breaking slightly. "Why would you do this? You barely know me. Your life is so short already. Why would you give up half of it for someone like me? Can we talk privately?" Taeyang asked. Yura nodded stiffly and led him to a smaller room. When the door closed behind them, she transformed fully into her massive dragon form, as if trying to remind him of the distance between them. She towered over him, scales gleaming, wings filling the space. "Explain yourself," she commanded. Taeyang looked up at her without fear. "You asked me this before in the garden. You want to know why I care?" "Yes." "Because when I saw you crying, I saw someone who had been strong for so long that she forgot anyone could be strong for her," Taeyang said. "Because in my short life, I've learned that time doesn't matter as much as what you do with it. And because you matter, Your Majesty, not as a queen, not as a symbol, as a person." Yura's massive form shuddered. "If you do this, I will owe you a debt I can never repay." "I'm not asking for payment," Taeyang said. "I'm asking for permission to help." "You are either the bravest or most foolish being I have ever met," Yura said. "Probably both," Taeyang admitted with a small smile. Yura closed her enormous eyes. When she opened them again, tears were forming. "Then you have my permission, and may the universe forgive me for accepting such a sacrifice." The preparations took a week. In that time, word of what they were planning spread through the diplomatic community. The reaction was swift and hostile. The Talshar Collective sent a formal protest, claiming that human genetic interference with the Drakir royal bloodline was dangerous and unethical. Several other species echoed this concern. They dressed it up in polite language, but the message was clear. They did not want the Drakir to survive. Ambassador Minho, the senior human diplomat, came to speak with Taeyang. "The political situation is getting dangerous," he said. "The Talshar are pushing hard against this. They're claiming you're trying to create some kind of hybrid weapon." "That's ridiculous," Hana said. "Of course it is," Minho agreed. "But several species are listening to them. Species who have already made deals for Drakir territory. They don't want those deals to fall through. So what do? Taeyang asked. "We proceed carefully," Minho said. "And we prepare for opposition." Captain Doyen, the commander of the human military vessel in the system, made his position clear. "If anyone tries to stop this procedure, they'll have to go through me and my crew first." The day of the procedure arrived. The medical facility was heavily guarded. Taeyang and Queen Yura were taken to a special chamber filled with both human and Drakir medical equipment. Yura had returned to her smaller, more human-like form. It was easier for the equipment to work with her that way. She lay on one medical platform while Taeyang lay on another right next to her. "Are you certain?" Yura asked him one last time. "I'm certain," Taeyang said. Jiwon and Yoonji made the final preparations. "Once we start the bio-neural link, you'll feel everything she feels," Jiwon warned Taeyang. 8,000 years of memories might bleed through. It could be overwhelming. "I can handle it," Taeyang said. "Ready?" Yoonji asked. They both nodded. The connection was initialized. At first there was nothing. Then, like a wave crashing over him, Taeyang felt it. Memories, emotions, sensations that were not his own flooded through his mind. He saw through Yura's eyes as she took her first flight as a young dragon, soaring through the clouds of her home world. He felt her joy and freedom. He felt her grief when her father died and the weight of the crown settled on her shoulders. So young, too young for such responsibility. He experienced centuries of rule, of decisions that affected billions of lives. The weight of it was crushing. He felt the slow realization that her people were dying. The years of searching for a cure, the gradual acceptance of the inevitable. He felt 8,000 years of loneliness of being the one everyone looked to but no one truly saw. And through it all, he felt her strength. The incredible will that kept her going, kept her standing, kept her being the pillar her people needed. But he also felt how tired she was. How ready to rest. Tears ran down Taeyang's face as he experienced the full weight of Yura's existence. No one should have to carry so much alone. No one. Through the link, Yura felt him too. She felt his determination, his stubborn refusal to give up. She felt his conviction that she deserved to live, to be happy, to be more than just a symbol of a dying empire. She felt something she had not felt in millennia, someone fighting for her, not because she was a queen, but because she was herself. The procedure continued for hours that first day. When they were finally disconnected, both of them were exhausted. Taeyang's face was pale and he looked older somehow. Yura's scales had a faint glow that had not been there before. "How do you feel?" Jiwan asked Taeyang. "Tired," he admitted. "But okay, how is she?" "Her genetic markers are responding," Yoonji said, reading the data. "It's working. But it's slow. We'll need to continue treatments for at least 3 more weeks." Over the next 3 weeks, they continued the procedure every day. Each time, the bio-neural link connected them, and they shared each other's lives more deeply. Taeyang watched himself age in the mirror. Gray appeared in his hair. Lines formed around his eyes. His body felt heavier, more tired, but Yura grew stronger. Her scales brightened. Her eyes cleared. The genetic damage was healing, slowly but surely. Through the link, they began to truly know each other. Not as queen and engineer, not as dragon and human, but as 2 people sharing the most intimate experience possible. Yura learned about Taeyang's childhood on Earth, his love for his sister, his grief over his mother's death. She understood why he could not stand to watch someone else give up. Taeyang learned about the young dragon Yura had been before duty crushed her joy. He saw the person she could be if she was free from the weight she carried, but not everyone was happy about what was happening. The Talshar increased their pressure. They claimed the procedure was dangerous, unethical. They demanded it be stopped. Commander Siwan came to speak with Yura one evening. "Your Majesty, the political situation is deteriorating. Several species are threatening sanctions if the procedure continues. They say you are being manipulated by the humans." "Manipulated?" Yura said coldly. "I made this choice freely." "I know that, Your Majesty," Siwan said. "But they do not care about truth. They care about their treaties for our territory." Nari, who was also present, spoke quietly. "They fear what this represents. If we survive, if we are saved by human sacrifice and ingenuity, it challenges the way they see the universe. It challenges their beliefs about power and worth." On the 21st day of treatment, complications arose. Alarms began blaring in the medical facility. Taeyang's body was rejecting the strain. His vital signs were dropping rapidly. He was aging faster than predicted, his cellular structure breaking down. Jiwan made a terrible discovery. "If we stop now, he'll survive. He'll have lost maybe 15 years, but he'll live. But if we continue..." She could not finish the sentence. Yura felt it through their link. She felt his body failing. She made the decision immediately. "Stop the procedure." "No," Taeyang said weakly. His voice was barely a whisper, but it was firm. "Finish it. You're dying," Yura said, and her voice broke. "Then make it count," Taeyang whispered. Yura looked at this human who was giving everything for her. She thought about 8,000 years of her life, of all the sacrifices she had watched others make. But never for her. Always because of duty, because of fear, because of politics. Never because someone simply decided she was worth saving. "Continue the procedure," she said, her voice heavy with grief and determination. "The Dragon Queen asked why a human would risk his life for her," Jiwan started. "Wait," Yoonji interrupted. "Look at the link. It's changing." On the monitors, they could see something unexpected happening. The bio-neural link between Taeyang and Yura was evolving. Instead of just flowing one way from Taeyang to Yura, it was becoming a circuit. Energy was flowing both ways. "What's happening?" Hana demanded, fear clear in her voice. "They're balancing each other," Yoonji said with wonder. "As he gives her life force, she's stabilizing him. It's becoming symbiotic. Is that possible?" Jiwan asked. "I don't know," Yoonji admitted. "We've never seen anything like this before." Over the next hours, they watched as the two life forces found equilibrium. Taeyang stopped deteriorating. His vital signs stabilized. At the same time, Yura's healing accelerated. The ancient genetic damage that had been killing her for 3,000 years was being repaired at an incredible rate. When they finally disconnected after that session, something had changed. Both Taeyang and Yura could feel it. Even without the link active, they could sense each other. It was faint but unmistakable, a connection that went deeper than technology, deeper than biology. What did we do? Yura whispered. I think we created something new, Taeyang said. His voice was weak, but he was alive. Gray streaked his hair now, and his face bore the lines of someone much older than 28. But his eyes were clear. How much time did I lose? He asked Ji-won. She checked the readings carefully. About 12 years. But the symbiotic bond seems to have stabilized you. You should still have a relatively normal lifespan from here. And Her Majesty? Eunji smiled for the first time in days. Completely healed. Better than healed, actually. Her genetic structure is stronger now than it has been in 1,000 years. Over the next few days, they completed the final treatments. Each time was easier than the last. The bond between Taeyang and Yura grew stronger, more stable. When they finally finished, both felt like they had been through a war, but they had won. Yura stood and stretched her wings. They gleamed with health and power. She felt stronger than she had in centuries. No, stronger than she had ever felt. The genetic poison that had been slowly killing her was gone, burned away by human stubbornness and sacrifice. But she also felt Taeyang. Even from across the room, she knew where he was, how he felt. It was like having another sense she had not known was possible. Can you feel it too? She asked him. Yes, Taeyang said. It's strange, but not bad. We don't know what this bond will mean long-term, Ji-won said. You two are connected in ways we don't fully understand yet. We'll figure it out, Taeyang said. He looked at Yura and smiled. Together. But while they had been focused on the procedure, the political situation had been getting worse. The Tal Shar Collective had been working hard to turn opinion against the humans and the Drakir. They spread rumors and lies, claiming the procedure had turned Queen Yura into something unnatural, something dangerous. Ambassador Minho came to brief them. The Galactic Council has called for an emergency session. They want answers about what you did. Let them have answers, Yura said. Her voice was strong and clear, ringing with the authority of 8,000 years. Call the council. I will speak to them myself. The council chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. When Queen Yura entered, everyone went silent. They had expected to see a dying queen, weak and fading. Instead, they saw a dragon in her full power, scales gleaming, eyes bright with health and intelligence. The Tal Shar ambassador stood to speak. His name was Kelvin, and he had spent decades positioning his people to inherit Drakir territory. Now all those plans were threatened. Queen Yura, Kelvin said with false politeness, we are pleased to see you looking so well, but we must address serious concerns about the method used to achieve this recovery. Concerns? Yura asked, her voice dangerously calm. The mixing of species genetics is unprecedented, Kelvin continued. We fear what might result from such experimentation. Already there are reports of unusual bonds forming between you and the human. Who knows what other changes might occur? This could be dangerous for the entire galaxy. Dangerous, Yura repeated. How interesting that you should use that word. She activated a holographic display. Data and documents filled the air above the council floor. These are genetic analyses of the Drakir royal bloodline, spanning 5,000 years. Notice anything unusual? The representatives leaned forward, studying the data. 3,000 years ago, something changed, Yura continued. A subtle alteration in our genetics, so subtle that our scientists did not notice it at first. But over centuries, it grew worse. It was killing us slowly and surely. What does this have to do with? Could it explain why the genetic markers match exactly the enhancement you gave us? Yura asked. Could it explain why the Tal Shar Collective has been so eager to divide our territory, so ready with treaties to claim our worlds? The other representatives began talking among themselves. Some looked angry. Others looked calculating, wondering what this meant for their own agreements with the Tal Shar. Taeyang stood up. He looked older now, gray hair and lined face making him look like a man in his 40s rather than his late 20s, but his voice was strong. The Tal Shar Collective tried to commit genocide, he said. Not with weapons or war, but with patience. They tried to kill an entire species so slowly that no one would notice. So slowly that even the victims would think it was natural. And you stopped them, said a representative from another species, by mixing human and Drakir genetics. Yes, Taeyang said simply. Is that so terrible? We saved lives. You created something unprecedented, another representative argued, a bond between species that we don't understand. How do we know it's safe? How do we know anything is safe? Taeyang countered. But I can tell you this, Queen Yura is alive and healthy. The genetic poison is gone. And yes, we have a bond. But that bond is based on sacrifice and trust. If that's dangerous, then I don't understand what safety means. Hana stood as well. My brother gave 12 years of his life to save Queen Yura. He didn't do it for political gain. He didn't do it for money or power. He did it because he saw someone in pain and decided to help. That's what humans do. Maybe that's what all of you have forgotten how to do. The chamber was silent. Then slowly, Nari stood from where she sat with the Drakir delegation. I have served the Drakir throne for 3,000 years, she said. I watched us slowly die, accepting it with dignity because we thought it was natural. But it was not natural. It was murder. And this human, with his short life and his foolish hope, saw what we could not. He saved not just our queen, but our entire species. Commander Siwan stood next. He had opposed the humans at first, viewing them as inferior, but he had watched Taeyang nearly die to save his queen. I was wrong about humans, he said bluntly. I thought them weak because they live such short lives. But perhaps it is because their lives are short that they value life so much. They taught us something we had forgotten, that fighting for others is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. One by one, other species began to stand. Not all of them, but enough. Species who had been moved by the story. Species who had their own grievances with the Talshar. Species who simply believed that saving lives was more important than political convenience. The Talshar representative looked around and saw his support crumbling. This is not over, Kelvin said coldly. No, Yura agreed. It is not. Your people will face justice for what you have done, not through war but through truth. We will share the cure with any species who wants it. We will investigate every gift the Talshar have ever given, and we will make sure the galaxy knows exactly what you are. Within days, the truth spread. Other species began examining their own genetics, their own treaties with the Talshar. More than a dozen civilizations discovered they too had been poisoned, just like the Drakir. Slowly, patiently, with the goal of eventual takeover, the Talshar collective did not collapse immediately, but their power and influence began to fade as the galaxy turned against them. The Dragon Queen asked why a human would risk his life for Hera. He just smiled and said, "Because you cried." 5 years had passed since that day in the Galactic Council chamber. The universe had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Taeyang stood in the crystal garden where he had first seen Queen Yura cry. He looked older now. The gray in his hair had spread and lines marked his face. He looked like a man in his early 40s, even though he was only 33. Those lost years showed on his body, but he had never once regretted them. The garden had changed too. Where Yura's tears had fallen and turned to crystal, new plants had grown, beautiful flowers that glowed with soft light, unique in all the galaxy. The Drakir called them hope flowers now. They had become a symbol of what could happen when someone refused to accept defeat. You come here often, Yura's voice said behind him. Taeyang turned and smiled. Yura was in her smaller form, the one that was closer to human size. She wore simple robes instead of her royal regalia. When she was just with him, she did not need to be the queen. She could just be Yura. I like to remember, Taeyang said. That night changed everything. Yes, Yura agreed, coming to stand beside him. It did. Through their bond, they could feel each other's emotions. It had taken time to get used to, but now neither could imagine being without it. The bond was not intrusive. It was more like knowing someone so well that you could sense their moods. Except this knowing went deeper than any normal friendship could. How was your meeting with the council? Taeyang asked. Productive, Yura said. 3 more species have requested the treatment. They discovered Talshar genetic tampering in their populations. Over the past 5 years, the cure that saved Yura had been refined and improved. It no longer required the dramatic sacrifice Taeyang had made. Human genetic material, carefully prepared and administered, could repair the damage the Talshar had caused. Hundreds of beings had been saved. The Drakir-Human Compact had become one of the most powerful alliances in the galaxy, not through military might but through cooperation and trust. Humans brought innovation and adaptability. The Drakir brought knowledge and resources. Together they accomplished things neither could alone. Prince Junho sends his greetings from Earth, Yura continued. He says the university program is going well. Junho had fully recovered from his treatment and had become the primary ambassador between humans and Drakir. He spent half his time on Earth, half on Drakir worlds, building bridges between the two species. Young humans and Drakir now studied together, learning from each other. And how is Ji-won? Taeyang asked. Still arguing with Yoonji about genetic theory, Yura said with amusement. Some things never change. Ji-won and Yoonji had become the leading researchers in cross-species medicine. Their work had saved thousands of lives and earned them recognition across the galaxy. They still argued constantly about methodology, but their friendship was strong. Your sister sent a message, Yura said. She wants to know if you'll be coming home for her wedding. Taeyang smiled. Of course I will. She's marrying Captain Doyen, right? Yes. Who would have thought that gruff old soldier would fall in love? Yura said. But I suppose stranger things have happened. A dragon queen and a human engineer becoming bonded, for example. They were quiet for a moment, comfortable in each other's presence. Through the bond, Taeyang could feel Yura's contentment, her peace. It was so different from that first night in the garden when he had felt only her grief and exhaustion. Do you miss it? Yura asked suddenly. The years you lost? It was not the first time she had asked. Probably would not be the last. The guilt still haunted her sometimes. No, Taeyang said honestly. I traded years at the end of my life for something meaningful. That's not a loss. That's a choice I'm proud of. Still, Yura said quietly, because of me you will have less time, less life to live. Because of you the life I have matters more, Taeyang countered. I could have lived to 90 doing nothing important. Instead I'll live to maybe 70 or 80 having helped change the galaxy. Which life is really longer? Yura smiled, but there was sadness in it. You humans and your strange wisdom. They walked together through the garden, not speaking. Words were not always necessary between them. The bond carried understanding better than language could. They passed other people in the garden. Humans and Drakir walking together, talking and laughing. 5 years ago, this would have been impossible. The species had barely known each other. Now they were friends, colleagues, family. I received an interesting proposal today, Yura said. From the Confederation of Free Worlds. Oh? Taeyang asked. They want to create a new position. A galactic mediator. Someone who can help resolve conflicts between species peacefully. She paused. They asked if I would recommend someone for the position. Who did you recommend? You, Yura said simply. Taeyang stopped walking. Me? But I'm not a diplomat. I'm an engineer. You are someone who sees problems and fixes them, Yura said. You are someone who cares more about doing what is right than what is easy. You are someone who taught an entire galaxy that sacrifice for others is not weakness. That sounds like a perfect mediator to me. I don't know, Taeyang said. That's a big responsibility. Yes, Yura agreed. But you do not have to decide now. Think about it. They continued walking until they reached the monument. The old one, with all the names of past dragon kings and queens, still stood, but beside it now stood a new monument. It showed a human and a Drakir with their hands clasped, looking toward the stars. The inscription read, Hope is not found in the length of our days, but in what we choose to do with them. Below that, in smaller letters, In memory of all who chose to care when caring seemed impossible. People still come here every day, Yura said. From dozens of species, they come to see where it all started. It started with you crying, Taeyang said softly. No, Yura corrected. It started with you refusing to walk away when you saw someone in pain. They stood before the monument, remembering. 5 years ago, everything had seemed impossible. The Drakir were dying. The galaxy had accepted it. But one human had looked at that inevitability and said no. They still ask, you know, Yura said. Other species, diplomats, scholars, they ask why a human would risk his life for a dragon queen he barely knew. What do you tell them? Taeyang asked. I tell them the truth, Yura said. She turned to look at him, her golden eyes warm. That you smiled and said, because you cried. And do they understand? Some do, Yura said. Others, I think it frightens them. The idea that someone would make such a sacrifice for no reason other than compassion, it challenges everything they believe about survival and self-interest. Good, Taeyang said. Maybe they need to be challenged. A group of young students passed by, a mix of humans and Drakir. They were laughing together, carrying books and equipment for some project. They glanced at Taeyang and Yura and smiled respectfully before continuing on. That's the future, Taeyang said, watching them go. A generation that grows up knowing cooperation is possible, knowing that caring about others makes you stronger, not weaker. Because of you, Yura said. Because of us, Taeyang corrected. You were the one who allowed yourself to be vulnerable. Who let me help? That took courage too. Yura was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I never thanked you. Not properly. You don't need to. Yes, I do, Yura interrupted. For 8,000 years I carried the weight of my people alone. I thought I had to. I thought showing weakness was betrayal. But you showed me that accepting help is not weakness. That letting others care about you is not failure. She took his hand. You gave me more than life, Taeyang. You gave me hope. You gave me connection. You reminded me what it means to not be alone. Taeyang squeezed her hand gently. Through the bond he could feel her emotions. Gratitude, yes, but also friendship. Trust, love, though not the romantic kind. Something deeper and stranger. The love between two people who had shared their very souls. You gave me purpose, Taeyang said. Before I met you, I was just fixing machines. Now I'm part of something bigger. Something that matters. They stood together as the 3 moons rose in the purple sky. The garden glowed around them, the hope flowers casting soft light. In the distance, they could hear music and laughter from the palace. There was a celebration tonight. 5 years since the Drakir-Human Compact was formed. I should get back, Yura said. People will be looking for me. Speeches to make, hands to shake. The duties of a queen, Taeyang said with a smile. Will you come with me? Yura asked. Always, Taeyang said. They walked back toward the palace together. As they walked, Taeyang thought about the question people always asked. Why would a human risk his life for a dragon queen? The answer was simple, even if others found it hard to understand. Because she had been in pain and he could not walk away from that. Because caring about others was not a calculation of benefit and cost. It was just what you did when you were human. When you were good. Because 5 years ago, he had seen the most powerful being in the galaxy crying alone in a garden, and he had decided that was not acceptable, and that decision had changed everything. The celebration was loud and joyful. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species filled the great hall. Music played. People danced and talked and laughed. Humans and Drakir, but also representatives from species who had benefited from the cure. Species who had learned to value cooperation over conquest. Taeyang saw his sister Hana dancing with Captain Doyun. She caught his eye and waved, smiling brightly. He waved back. She looked happy. They all did. Ambassador Minho gave a speech about the importance of the compact and the future they were building together. Commander Siwan spoke about the strength found in unexpected places. Prince Junho talked about learning from human optimism. Then it was Yura's turn to speak. She stood before the crowd in her full dragon form, magnificent and powerful, but when she spoke, her voice was gentle. 5 years ago, my people were dying and I had accepted it, she said. I thought that was wisdom. I thought that was strength. But a human showed me I was wrong. Accepting defeat is not wisdom. Fighting for each other, sacrificing for each other, caring for each other even when it is difficult. That is true strength. She looked at Taeyang. Someone asked me recently why a human would risk his life for a dragon queen. The answer is simple. Because he saw me crying, and he decided that was not acceptable. That is what it means to be human. That is what we all should aspire to be. The crowd applauded. Taeyang felt his face flush with embarrassment. He had never wanted to be a hero. He had just wanted to help. Later, when the celebration had quieted down and most people had left, Taeyang returned to the garden one last time. He stood among the hope flowers, their soft glow illuminating the darkness. Yura found him there. She always did. The bond between them made sure they could always find each other. Tired of the celebration? She asked. Just needed some quiet, Taeyang admitted. They stood together in comfortable silence. After a while, Yura spoke. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had walked away that night? If you had never seen me crying? Sometimes, Taeyang said, but not in a bad way, just curious. Would the Drakir have survived? Would someone else have found the cure? Perhaps, Yura said. Or perhaps we would have faded away and the galaxy would have moved on without us. We will never know. I'm glad I didn't walk away, Taeyang said. So am I, Yura said softly. They looked up at the stars together, at the vast universe spreading out above them. Somewhere out there were thousands of worlds, billions of people, all living their lives, all with their own struggles and joys. And here, in this garden on this world, stood a human and a dragon who had chosen to care about each other, who had shown that compassion was not weakness, that sacrifice could change everything. The future is going to be interesting, Taeyang said. Yes, Yura agreed, but we will face it together. Together, Taeyang echoed, and in that moment, with the hope flowers glowing around them and the stars shining above, both of them knew that they had found something rare and precious. Not just survival, not just alliance, they had found connection, understanding, the knowledge that in a vast and often cold universe someone cared. And that made all the difference.